Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We are continuing on with our qaida number 30 about when two or more people share in an item of wealth, then if some refurbishment work needs to be done, then they all have to chip in accordance with the amount that they own, and this is pertaining to the minimum refurbishment, so not to the decoration aspect, but to the minimum refurbishment that is required to sustain the wealth, be it a house or a land or a wall. This also includes a wall which two neighbors share. If this needs to be refurbished, then they would both chip in and share the cost. Also, if you have two neighbors and one has a room which oversees the rooms of his neighbor, then he has to create a partitioning which would prevent him from seeing into the private property of his neighbor. Because, of course, we know you're not allowed to look into the private property of other people. We also say that if two or more people share in a property or some wealth and that wealth increases, then that increase is also shared amongst the partners. For example, they share in a sheep and the sheep gives birth to its young, then the young are also shared property between the two partners. This is also true with losses as well. So for example, if you own in a date palm tree and it gets burnt down, then both partners share the loss. The increase could be muttasil, joined on to the wealth. So for example, you could have an ownership of a servant. So for example, two people could own a servant, and this servant learns new skills. Of course, now he becomes more valuable. Then this extra value is muttasil, it's joined onto the servant. It's not something which is separate from the servant. So they both share in this increase in value as well. In the previous example, we talked about a sheep giving birth to its young. This is also an increase in value or wealth, but it is not joined onto the sheep itself. It is munfasil, or separated from the sheep, or the original wealth. A similar situation to this would be, let's suppose we have two people A and B, and person C owes them both a debt. And person C has hijr made upon him, so he is restricted in terms of what he can do with the wealth. And if you have to sell off his wealth in order to pay back the debt, but in so doing, you cannot recover the full debt. And so only part of the debt can be paid off to both person A and B, while in this case you would have to divide up this money into an appropriate ratio in accordance with the debt owed to person A and B, and they receive their share. They do not receive anything more than that, even though they have not received the full debt which was owed to them. And this is simply because the value of the wealth of person C was not sufficient. But then in a case like this, there is nothing much you can do. So if we just take a simple example, person A is owed £10,000, person B is owed £5,000. So person A is owed twice as much as person B. We sell off the wealth of the mahjur alayhi, and we find that we only have £3,000. So in a case like this, we would give person A £2,000 and person B £1,000. So that's a ratio 2 to 1. And it's a similar case with the awl, where the fractions to be given in inheritance add up to more than 1. So what would happen is that the shares would be kept the same, but the amount in each proportion would be less than it would have been. So in our debt example, the proportion was 2 to 1 in favor of A. So A to B is 2 to 1. But of course, in each of the portion, less money is being received. So instead of person A receiving £10,000, he receives £2,000. And person B, instead of receiving 5,000, he receives 1,000. So the awl is a similar case, where the proportions and fractions remain the same, but the amount of money in each portion will be less. Al-awl is the opposite of ar-rad, in which the proportions is the same, but the amount in each proportion would be higher than otherwise. So for example, if a woman dies, she leaves behind her husband, 2 full sisters, and a mother, then the 2 full sisters will have 2/3, the mother has a 1/6, and the husband has a 1/2. So we have a 1/2 plus a 1/6 plus a 1/3. That gives us more than 1. So if we take the 3 fractions involved, a 1/2, 2/3 and a 1/6, the lowest common denominator of these fractions is 6. Thus we would divide the wealth up into 6 parts. The husband receives 1/2, so that's 3 parts. The sisters receive 2/3, so that would be 4 parts, because that's 2/3 of 6. And the mother receives 1/6, that's 1 part. 3 plus 4 plus 1 is 8. 8 parts out of 6. So we've gone overboard. So the awl is, we, instead of dividing the wealth up into 6 parts, we would divide it up into 8 parts. So in the beginning, the husband was due to receive 3 parts, he receives 3 parts. The sisters likewise will receive 4 parts, nothing changes there, and with the mother also nothing changes, she receives 1 part. But it's just that we've divided the wealth up into 8 parts instead of 6 parts. So what's happening here is that though they receive the same number of parts, but the amount of wealth contained in these parts will be less. The opposite of al-awl is al-rad, where the parts remain the same, but it's just that the amount of money contained in these parts will be more. So for example, a woman dies, she leaves behind a husband and a mother. The husband receives a half, the mother receives a third. Now a half plus a third gives you 5/6, of course, which is less than 1. So how do we divide up the inheritance? Well, the lowest common denominator of a half and a third is 6. So we divide the wealth up into 6 parts. The husband gets a half of it, which would be 3 parts. The mother receives a third, which would be 2 parts. 3 parts plus 2 parts is 5 parts. So we have 5 parts out of 6 parts, which leaves us 1 whole part spare. So what do? We make a rad, which is, instead of dividing the wealth up into 6 parts, which is what we were doing ordinarily, we divide it simply up into 5 parts. So therefore the number of parts which the husband and the mother receive remain the same, but it's just that the amount of money contained in these parts is more, so that it makes up the full wealth which is to be inherited. Okay, we now move on to qaida number 31. قد تتبعض الأحكام بحسب تفاوت أسبابها. Rulings can be given part way depending on the varying circumstances and causes of this ruling. This qaida is a subtle one. It's very easy to miss this out. You need to know what the illah or the justification is for a particular ruling to be given. We need to illustrate this using an example. Let us suppose person A claims that person B stole his wealth. Now, with the case of stealing, we are talking about a had punishment, and a had punishment can only be applied with 2 just male witnesses. However, with the case of stealing, it is also a financial affair, and we know that with a financial affair you need 2 just male witnesses, but also 2 women and a man can also establish financial rights. On top of that, we also know that 1 just witness and an oath taken by the claimant can also establish the financial rights. So let us suppose then, in our example, as we said, person A claims that person B stole his wealth, and he wants his wealth back, of course. He does not have 2 male just witnesses. He has 2 female just witnesses and 1 male. Or we could say he has 1 male witness and he takes an oath. And on top of that, person A takes an oath that this witness is speaking the truth. Now in a case like this then, we would have to say to person B, you must return the wealth. But if you think about it, the claim was that person B stole the wealth, and the punishment for stealing is the hand being cut off. So in our scenario, will the hand of person B be cut off? The answer is no. How come? When we have had the witnesses testifying. Because we say that when it comes to the had punishment, then it can only be established by 2 just male witnesses, not with 2 women and 1 male, nor with 1 male witness and an oath. Because at best, these alternatives establish financial rights, not the had punishment rights. So here you would need to notice this subtle difference. So in our case of person A and B, the condition for returning the wealth was met with the witnesses, but the conditions for cutting the hand off were not met, which is the 2 male witnesses. Also, what about an acknowledgement if person B admits to his guilt? Now, if we go by the opinion that person B's hand would be cut off if he admits or makes iqrar twice, because that would replace the 2 just witnesses, then his hand would be cut off. But if he makes the iqrar only once, then at best he has to return the wealth, but his hand is not cut off. So again, upon this opinion then, we have a case of the ahkam or the ruling being given part way or part of it, not the whole ruling being given. Also, we can include in this the issue of al-khula', which is also a financial issue. The woman gives back the mahr to the husband and parts from him, and this is an annulment of the marriage. It is not an official divorce. Let us suppose the husband claims that the woman made khula' and the woman denies it. The husband brings not 2 witnesses but 1 male witness, and the husband takes an oath that this witness of his is telling the truth. Or for example, the other alternative, the husband brings 2 female witnesses and 1 male witness to testify for him that the wife of his gave him khula'. Now the point is, when the husband claims that the wife made khula' with him, he is in fact claiming that the wife owes him money. So if he brings these witnesses, then what we say is that the financial right must be observed, so the woman must give him the money, and then a second action must be taken, which is that the woman is separated from him, and she observes 1 menstrual cycle as the iddah period, because he is essentially acknowledged that the woman is now no longer his wife. She has to be separated from him, and that his marriage is annulled. So what we find here in the issue we've given is that the financial right is respected by way of the witnesses, either 2 female and 1 male, or 1 male witness with an oath from the claimant, or 2 male witnesses. So this deals with the financial right. As for the khula', which is when the woman separates from the husband, then this is not by way of the witnesses, rather this is by way of the husband confessing to it, so his iqrar. So the sabab for the mahr to be given back to him was the witnesses, and the sabab for the woman to be separated from him was his iqrar, the husband's confession. Let us now reverse the roles. Now the woman claims that she had made khula' with the husband, and the husband denies it. Notice here that the woman is not claiming any financial package, because in the khula' it is the woman who gives away the wealth. So when a woman claims khula', she is not claiming any money. Rather, what she's claiming is that she is separated from the husband, and this is not a financial matter. Therefore, if the woman brings 2 female and 1 male witnesses, or 1 male witness and she takes an oath, then this cannot establish the khula'. Rather, these types of witnesses establish the financial rights, not the separation between a husband and his wife. Notice this difference here. It is a crucial difference. Thus, the only way, if the woman makes a claim for khula', she can establish her rights is to bring 2 just male witnesses. That's it. You cannot have the alternative of the 2 female and 1 male witness, nor of the 1 male witness with the claimant making the oath. That will not work, and it will not cut the ice when it comes to the separation of a husband and a wife. So it is clear to us that she will not be separated from the husband. But what about the wealth? Will she not have to give the mahr to the husband? Well, we say no, because if she's not separated from the husband, then why is she giving him the mahr? You cannot be giving the mahr to the husband unless you're separated from him. Therefore, if it is established that she is not separated from the husband, because we don't have sufficient evidence to do this, then it would naturally follow that she does not give the mahr to the husband. Notice the difference then between the 2 scenarios. In the first scenario, the husband was claiming his financial right, and he was able to establish it with the witnesses. In the second scenario, the husband is refusing this financial right, and the wife is not claiming any financial rights. She's simply claiming that she is separated from the husband, and the husband is refusing that she owes him any mahr. So we find then the rulings between the 2 scenarios drastically differ, but in the first scenario where the husband makes the claim, the ruling is given due to the different sabab. His financial right is secured due to the witnesses, and his separation from the wife is secured due to his own confession or acknowledgement that he is separated from her. Notice in a khula', the husband issues the separation. So he says, khala'tuki, I make khula' on you. So he is the one who issues the separation. The woman does not issue the separation. Rather, she is separated. She is the one done to, she is not the doer. Also from the examples which the ulama give, is that the child follows his father in terms of the lineage or bloodline. So if Amr is married to Zainab, they have a child called Abdullah, then we would say Abdullah ibn Amr. We would not say Abdullah ibn Zainab, except of course in the one glaring example of Isa ibn Maryam. But the son follows the mother in terms of freedom. So you could be a servant or you could be a free person. The son follows the mother in terms of the freedom, not in terms of the lineage. So if a servant man marries a free woman, then their children would be free, just like the mother. If a free man marries a servant woman, then their children will be servants just like the mother. And for this reason Allah has made haram a free man to marry a servant woman so as to prevent the children from being servants as well. It is possible for a free man to marry a servant woman, but certain conditions must be met first. But generally the case is that he's not allowed to marry a servant woman, because you need to prevent the children from becoming servants. However, just note the difference here. The ulama say that if a man has a servant woman and he does not marry her, but he has intercourse with her and she gives birth to a child of his, then this child will be free and not a servant. And this is because now we are not talking about a marriage situation. So when we say that the child follows the mother, then we are talking about a marriage situation. So in a marriage, he would follow the mother in terms of being a servant or free. As for the lineage, he always follows the father. What about in terms of the deen? What deen he is upon? So is this the deen of the mother or the father? Well, we say he follows the deen of the better of the two. If a Muslim man marries a Christian woman and they have children, the children will be Muslim. If two kuffar marry and the woman converts to Islam, then if they have children, the children will be Muslim, just like the mother. So if the children were to die, they would be treated as Muslims and buried in a Muslim cemetery, and all the rest of the rulings would apply to them just like any other Muslim. And this is if the child is very small, of course. If he is old enough to make up his own mind and he chooses whatever deen he chooses, then he is upon that deen. What about if we have two different types of animals who have a child together? Then in terms of najasa and halal and haram, the child will follow the one who is more najis or the one who is more haram. So for example, we talk about a mule who is a cross between a horse and a donkey. Horse is tahir and halal to be eaten. A donkey is najis and not halal to be eaten, if the donkey dies, of course. So what about the mule? Do we say the mule is halal to be eaten or not? Well, we say he follows the worst one. So he would follow the donkey, and he's treated as such. So a mule is not allowed to be eaten. Or if we have an animal born from a wolf and a hyena, what do we say about this type of animal? Well, a wolf is impermissible to be eaten. A hyena is permissible to be eaten. So we say the child of these two would belong to the one which is most haram and najis, which is the wolf. Thus the child is impermissible to be eaten in this case. Also from the examples falling under this qaida is the tafriq as-safaqa. You have a business contract, but you split it up between halal and haram. So you put into effect some of the contract, but not the other part, which is haram. So to give an example, the seller sells a fruit juice container, let's say orange juice, and a wine container. Now in a case like this, we would make permissible the halal container and make impermissible the haram container, which contains the wine, of course. Here we can easily split between the two, and we can split the price up. And we would not say that this is a case where the haram and the halal come together, so we give precedence to the haram and make it all haram. No, rather, because in this case we can split it up perfectly well. So in our example, let us suppose the man sells both of these containers for £20. Now we would give the wine container a value. We would pretend the wine is normal fruit juice, let's say orange juice, and we would give it a value. We would have to pretend it's orange juice because wine in and of itself in the Sharia does not have any value because it is haram. Thus destroying haram items like musical instruments and khamr would not incur any guarantee on the one who destroys them, because if you destroy something with zero value, then you have to pay back precisely nothing. So notice that if a Muslim destroys the khamr which belongs to another Muslim, he does not need to pay back anything. But if he destroys khamr belonging to a kafir, he would need to pay him back, because in the deen of the kafir, the khamr is halal, and the kafir therefore is not bound by the rules of the Sharia in his deen. So anyway, we would take the khamr container, take the wine container, and give it a value, and then we would subtract this value from the total price, which was £20, and so the buyer just has to give the remainder. And we would use ratio and proportion to work out how much the buyer needs to give to the seller. We can have other cases of contracts where, let us suppose, a man has a servant and he also has another boy who is free and not a servant, and he sells them both as if they were both servants, and he sells them both in one sales contract. So of course, when it comes to the free boy, you're not allowed to sell him, and this contract is batil but with the servant you are allowed to sell him, so from that side it is sahih, or in effect. And again, we would use ratio and proportion to determine how much the buyer actually has to pay the seller. Or it could be, let's suppose a man has his horse and he takes somebody else's horse, so 2 horses now, and he sells them both. The sale is correct in as far as his own horse is concerned, but it is invalid in as far as the other person's horse is concerned. So again, we would split off this trade. We would decrease the price using ratio and proportion. We would give a value to his horse and a value to the other horse which he does not own. We would look at their ratio and use that ratio to subtract the proportion from the price. So let's suppose his horse was worth £1,000 and the other horse belonging to the other person was worth £2,000. So we have a ratio of 1 to 2. Let us suppose that he sold both of these horses for £1,500. So the ratio is 1 to 2, and so if we add the proportions, we have 3 parts. The invalid horse, meaning the horse belonging to someone else, is 2/3 of the total, because the ratio is 1 to 2. Hence, we would have to take off 2/3 of the price of the contract. Now, you'll remember the price in the contract was £1,500. Taking off 2/3 means we do 1,500 minus 1,000, because 1,000 is 2/3 of 1,500. That leaves us with 500. So the buyer pays the seller £500, and he takes the horse which belongs to the seller, and he's not allowed to take the horse which belongs to the other person. Also from the qaida is that we know the testimony of a son for his father or father for his son is not acceptable. So the furu' and the usul, they cannot testify for each other because they would be accused of showing favoritism. But if they testified against each other, then it is accepted. However, if we know that the son testifying for his father is definitely adl, he's definitely just, and he knows for sure what he's talking about, and we do not feel it is possible that he will give a false testimony, do we still reject his testimony? Some scholars will say yes, definitely, we stick to the rule and we reject his testimony for his father or his mother. Some other scholars have said no, we would accept it, because in a case like this, we cannot suspect him of showing favoritism if he is known to be adl, or just, because such a person will only testify in accordance with the truth. And if we so happen to have indications which tell us that the testimony of this son is true, then this is even more of a reason to accept his testimony. And this is a decent opinion, and we would leave it down to the ijtihad of the qadi to see what course of action he would take. Similarly, the testimony of a man against another man whom he is an enemy to is not accepted, but his testimony for such a person is accepted. So quite the opposite with the father and son situation. The evidence that the testimony of a son against his father is accepted in Surah An-Nisa, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ بِالْقِسْطِ شُهَدَاءَ لِلَّهِ وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوِ الْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ. O believers, stand up as just witnesses for Allah, even if it is against your own selves or your parents or near kindred. But what about this situation? The father gives a testimony that his son is in fact married to this particular woman, and the woman is denying this. Is the testimony of the father accepted? Well, we ask, is he testifying for his son or against his son? Here we can argue both ways. He's testifying for his son in that the woman belongs to the son now because she's his wife. That would be a testimony for the son's favor. But he could be testifying against the son in that if the woman does belong to the son, then he owes her the mahr and the nafaqah, the living expenditure, and all the other responsibilities which come your way when you are a husband. So it's a for and against situation here. So because of this, some ulama have said that his testimony now is accepted, and others have said it is not accepted, which is the famous opinion amongst the Hanabila scholars. As for the case with the enemies, then this should be clear enough to understand. Of course, they would be accused of trying to bring the other down, so therefore his testimony against him would not be accepted. But for him, it would be accepted, because now he's no longer suspected of foul play. So it's all about whether you suspect foul play or not. Okay, but what about this? Is the testimony of person A accepted if he testifies in favor of person B, and person A and B are both friends? Do we suspect foul play here? Well, if we say that the testimony is not accepted because they're friends, then we would be saying that the testimony of one friend for another is not accepted. But in a case like this, we would have to reject most testimonies in a court, and it would also lead to enmity, because nobody would want to be the other's friend, because he would know that if such a person was to testify for him, it would not be accepted from him. So such a person who is due to appear in court would want to break off the friendship, and this would lead to enmity between the people. So you can see the destructive effect that this would have. So it is best to say that the testimony of one friend for his friend is accepted, unless it be a case of extreme friendship, where one person would something like kill himself for the other. If it is a case of extreme friendship, then it is not fitting for us to accept the testimony of one friend for the other. As for the testimony of one friend against his friend, then this is accepted and there's no problems with that. At the end of the day, the bottom line is we have to look at, is there reasonable grounds for suspicion of foul play? Now on to قاعدة number 32. من أدى عن غيره واجبا بنية الرجوع عليه رجع وإلا فلا. Whoever performs a wajib action on behalf of someone else with the intention of taking payment from that other person can go to that person to take payment, otherwise he does not take any payment. And so to explain this, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, فَإِنْ أَرْضَعْنَ لَكُمْ فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ. And if they breastfeed the children for you, then give them their wages, or their monetary reward. So the father has to give the woman who is breastfeeding his child money. So the mother who breastfeeds the child, and the child belongs to the father, then she is performing a wajib action for the father of the child. So she deserves her wages from the father. Because now the point is that she is breastfeeding the child, so the father is free from this obligation of feeding the child. So we would say then that whoever performs an obligatory action on behalf of someone else, such that that someone else would become free of the action, then the one performing the action deserves his or her wages. Another example of this would be, let us suppose a man spends on the wife of another man, or on the children of another man. And we're talking about the daily living expenses here, the nafaqah. And he does this with the intention that he's going to go to the actual husband of the wife or the father of the children and take his money back from him. So if that's the case, then he's allowed to do this. Another example would be, let us suppose person A owes a debt to person B, but person C pays off this debt on behalf of person A, because maybe person A does not have the money right now. So he does this on behalf of person A with the intention that when person A has enough money, he's going to go to person A and take back the money which he paid. However, in all of these examples which we have given, if the person doing this wajib action intended just to do the other person a favor, then he's not allowed to return to the original person and demand his wages or his money back. So we can divide this up into three categories when it comes to somebody who performs a wajib action on behalf of someone else. So number one, he intends thereby to return to that person and demand his wages. So our qaida tells us that he can do this. The second category is that he simply intends to do a favor. So in this case, he has no right to return to that original person and demand his wages or monetary reward. The third category is that he does not intend either of the above two. So in this case as well, we give it the same ruling as the second. He has no right to demand any payment from the original person on whose behalf he is performing this obligatory action. But what about this scenario? If person C pays person A's debt on his behalf to the creditor, person B, then person C goes to person A to take back the money which he gave, and person A refuses to give it to person C. We say that it is obligatory upon person A to give the money to person C, because when it comes to fulfilling the debts, then the intention is not a condition. The debt must be fulfilled whether you intended it or not. So therefore it is upon person A to give the money to person C. However, when it comes to obligatory debts for which a niyyah or an intention is stipulated or is a condition, such as the zakah or the kafara or the nadhr, these three are debts upon you and you have to intend them before you perform them. So let us suppose you have one of these, either a zakah or a kaffara or a nadhr upon you, which is obligatory of course upon you to fulfill, and somebody else does it on your behalf. So somebody else, let's say, gives zakah from his money on your behalf. Now the question, are you free of giving zakah, such that now zakah is not obligatory upon you because it has been paid on your behalf? Well, remember what we said, the intention is necessary, as it is an act of worship. And seeing as though you did not intend to give the zakah, then the zakah has not been given on your behalf. Hence, the zakah is still obligatory upon you. If that is the case, then the person who gave the zakah on your behalf is not allowed to come to you and demand that money back from you. Why? Because firstly, you did not appoint him to give the zakah on your behalf. If you appointed him, then yes, there would be a point. He could come back to you and demand the money which he paid, and this is because you appointed him. But as for if you did not appoint him, nor gave him permission to do so, then he cannot come back to you to demand the money from you which he paid for the zakah. And this is because the zakah, the kaffara and the nadhr, they have an intention which must come before it. As for simply paying off a debt which you owe to someone else, then this does not require an intention, as it is not that type of act of ibadah. So notice the difference here between the intention and non-intention, and this is why we said that whoever performs a wajib action on behalf of someone else such that that someone else would be free of that obligatory action, then he can demand his money back from the original person if he so intended to do so in the first place. But the point with the zakah situation is that if, let us suppose, person B pays the zakah on behalf of person A without person A appointing person B to do so, then because person A did not make the intention to pay the zakah, person A is not free from the obligation of paying the zakah. And because he's not free from doing so, person B cannot return back to person A and demand the money which he paid in the zakah payment. Why? Because like we said, person A is not free from the obligation. So person B paying the zakah did not free person A from the obligation of paying the zakah. Whereas when it comes to the debt which you owe to another person, if person B pays the debt on behalf of person A to the creditor of person A, then this does not require an intention, and hence person A, who is the debtor originally, he is free from paying back the debt to his creditor. And so because he is free, person B, who paid the debt on behalf of person A with the intention of taking his money back, he is allowed to return to person A and demand the money which he paid. So understand this difference. However, from this we move to a related discussion. Let's talk about the zakah. Person B gives the zakah payment on behalf of person A. And we just said that person B does not have the right to demand his money back from person A. However, if person A now finds out that person B has given zakah on his behalf and he approves of this action and permits it, then can person B demand his money back from person A? Well, in order to answer this question, we would have to answer the prior question, is person A free from the zakah payment or not? Some scholars say no. Even if person A did permit this action of person B, still person B is not allowed to demand the money back, and person A is not free from the zakah payment. The second opinion on this issue is that if in the case that person A allows this action of person B and he acknowledges it and approves of it, then yes, person A is freed from the zakah payment and he would need to give the money to person B. You'll remember person B paid the zakah on behalf of person A without his consent initially. And this second opinion is the better opinion, and we have evidence where Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu was guarding the zakah payment and shaitan came in the form of a man trying to steal from the zakah. Abu Hurairah caught him and shaitan made his excuse that he is poor, he has family, and Abu Hurairah therefore let him off. And when the Prophet found out about this, he acknowledged it. He said, fine, that's fair enough what you did, even though that money was not intended for shaitan. What about something like Hajj, which is more of a bodily act of worship rather than financial, even though there is some finance involved? So let us suppose person A cannot perform the Hajj. Person B performs the Hajj on behalf of person A without asking him and without person A appointing person B to perform the Hajj. Is person A free from the obligation now? Again, we say that person A did not make the intention, so he cannot be free from the obligation. However, according to the second opinion, we can say that if person A finds out about this action of person B performing the Hajj on his behalf, and he allows this action and approves of it, then yes, person A is free from the obligation of the Hajj now. And this opinion is far more flexible and makes life easier. Let us move on to قاعدة number 33. إذا تزاحمت المصالح قدم الأعلى منها. If we have certain benefits which are competing with each other, so that you can only choose one of them, then you must choose the best of them. فيقدم الواجب على المستحب. So the wajib is given precedence over the mustahab action. والراجح من الأمرين على المرجوح. And the more beneficial of the two actions is given precedence over the action which is of a lesser benefit. Or we could say whichever maslaha is weightier, this is given precedence over the one which carries less weight. وإذا تزاحمت المفاسد اضطر إلى واحد منها قدم الأخف منها. And if the corruptions or the detrimental effects are competing with each other and you have to choose one of them, then you would have to choose the lesser of the detrimental actions. As for the evidence of this qaida, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ. Verily this Qur'an guides to that which is most upright. So you need to always opt for the action which is most upright, or which is most beneficial, or which is least detrimental. Likewise, Allah saying, وَاتَّبِعُوا أَحْسَنَ مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكُم مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. And follow the best of what has been revealed to you or sent down to you from your Lord. So if you have to choose between two good options, you would choose the best of them, the ahsan of them. Or if you have to choose between two evil options, you would have to choose the lesser of them. Of course, this is in a case when you have no other alternative. Likewise, Allah saying, الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. Those who listen to the speech and follow the best of it. So if you have a choice to do something which is mustahab and something which is wajib, you would opt for the wajib because that's the best of it. So instead of opting for second best, you would opt for the best. Or if you have two wajib actions, but one of the wajib is more emphasized and more virtuous than the other wajib, then you would have to follow the ahsan, that which is better. So you would always opt for that which is more beloved to Allah. And we know the authentic hadith, مَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُهُ عَلَيْهِ. My servant does not draw closer to me with anything more beloved to me than the fard actions upon him. So this is where we are talking about choosing the best of two good actions. As for the other side of the coin, choosing the lesser of the two harmful actions, we have the story of Al-Khidr. He bore a hole in the ship of the Masakin. Clearly this is harmful, but if he did not do so, something yet more harmful would take place, which is that tyrant king would usurp their ship altogether. So a broken ship is better than no ship. Likewise, Al-Khidr killing a small boy, clearly this is something which is negative and of a detrimental effect. But if he did not do so, something yet worse would have happened, which is that this boy would grow up and harm his parents through his kufr and ingratitude. Of course, this was inspired to Al-Khidr. Al-Khidr could not have known the future by himself. Of course, we know that no one knows the future by their own selves. With respect to the boy, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, فَانْطَلَقَا حَتَّى إِذَا لَقِيَا غُلَامًا فَقَتَلَ قَالَ أَقَتَلْتَ نَفْسًا زَكِيَّةً بِغَيْرِ نَفْسٍ لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا نُكْرًا. Then they both proceeded until they met a boy, and this was a boy, it's been said he was playing with the other boys, and Khidr singled him out and killed him. Musa a.s. said, you have killed a pure soul who had killed no one else, so you did not kill him in retaliation. Verily you have committed a monstrosity. Al-Khidr replied, قَالَ أَلَمَ قُلْ لَكَ إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. Did I not tell you that you will not be able to keep patient with me? If you do not have full knowledge about a matter, it is very difficult to keep patient over it, because you'll keep asking yourself, why did this happen? But when it comes to the explanation of this act, Al-Khidr tells him, وَأَمَّا الْغُلَامُ فَكَانَ أَبَوَاهُ مؤمنين فخشينا أن يرهقهما طغيانا وكفرا. As for the young boy, then his parents were believers, they were mu'mineen, and we feared that this boy will turn his parents into kuffar. And the way this is going to happen is that because his parents love this boy so much and they were so joyous when he was born, they would do anything for him, even if it means turning kuffar. Because, as in the tafsir we find, that this boy, kufr was written for him the day he was born. He was going to grow up to be a kafir. This was written for him. And not just that, he was going to turn his parents into kuffar as well, as they were going to follow him in his deen. Why? Because of their love for him. And this would be a great calamity. He goes on, فأردنا أن يبدلهما ربهما خيرا منه زكاة وأقرب رحما. So we intended that their Lord should change him for one who is more righteous and pure and nearer to mercy. There is no doubt that killing any young boy is a mafsada, it is something which is corrupt. But Al-Khidr had to do this because if he just left the matter to its own affairs, then this would have led to a greater calamity. So from this we can learn two real and practical lessons at least. The first one is to choose the lesser of the two harmful actions, if in a case of necessity. The second action is to keep patient over the qadr of Allah. There will be certain events which take place in your life which will be calamitous, and you're wondering why or how could this happen to you. But the point is, you do not fully comprehend the qadr of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So it will be difficult for you to keep patient over this. But you must keep patient, just as it was obligatory for Musa alayhi salam to keep patient with Al-Khidr when Al-Khidr was performing these actions which Musa alayhi salam simply could not understand. And you, O listener, akramakallah, will also go through times in life where events will take place which you simply cannot understand. But you must know that there is always wisdom behind calamities which befall you. And there is nothing more for you to do except keep patient and know that there is a wisdom for which this is all happening. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. And perhaps it could be that you hate something, but it is better for you. So when it comes to doing the more virtuous action, then let us suppose you have 1 dinar and you have many near relatives as well, upon whom you have to spend. Would you spend on your near relatives, or would you spend this dinar on other poor people who are not your relatives? We say that the more virtuous action is to spend it on your relatives. In fact, that would be wajib, and to spend on the poor is mustahab, so you always follow the best of what has been revealed to you. Because it has been revealed to you that you spend on your relatives. It has also been revealed to you from Allah that you spend on the poor, but you follow the best, the ahsan. And the ahsan here is to spend on your relatives. And also from the examples, for the woman, for her to obey her husband is more emphasized than obeying her parents. The obedience to both is wajib in all that which is good, but out of these two obligations, the husband's rights are rajih, they're weightier. Similarly, obeying Allah is wajib, and obeying your parents and all that which is good is wajib, but if the two collide, then you give precedence to obeying Allah. In the prayer, the rawatib sunan are to be given precedence over the mutlaq sunan. Also, those actions which will benefit others are to be given precedence over those actions which will only benefit you, as long as both of these actions are equal in their strength and virtue. So for example, you can either fast or you can help out in the community in some way which will benefit others, maybe planting trees or feeding others and so on. So you give precedence to that which will benefit others, as long as both of them are of equal strength. But we cannot say that zakah is therefore more virtuous than salah, because zakah benefits others and salah only benefits yourself. Because these two actions are not of equal strength. The salah without doubt has far more strength than the zakah. Also, if you have a choice to seek knowledge or to do some optional acts of ibadah like salah and siyam, you opt for the knowledge, because maybe fasting will make you weaker and hence you will not be able to seek knowledge, so you cannot do both at the same time. So you give precedence to the knowledge. This will benefit you and others as well. It will benefit the ummah. With regards to opting for the lesser of the two detrimental effects, if let's say you are in a state of ihram and you are forced to do one of two things, either to eat a dead sheep, now you know dead meat is haram to be eaten, or to hunt a game animal and eat its meat. but in a state of ihram, the game animal is haram to be hunted and the meat eaten. So both of them are haram upon you, but you have to choose one, otherwise you'd die. Which one do you do? Some scholars said that in a case like this, you would choose the dead sheep because if you were to eat this, you would not have to pay the jaza, which you would have to do if you were to kill the game animal. And also, the sheep is already dead, so you're not killing anything, whereas the game animal, you would be killing it unjustly. So these are at least two reasons why you should opt for the sheep. But the correct opinion here is that you opt for hunting and thereby killing the game animal and eating its meat, because at least this meat in and of itself would be halal, because it would be slaughtered or killed in a halal way. Hence he could eat the meat and others can also eat this meat, and the meat in and of itself is tahir, whereas the dead sheep is najis. But upon this opinion, if he was to kill the game animal, would he have to offer the jaza, which is the penalty for killing the land game animal in a state of ihram? We could debate this issue. You can say that this would be very much like Ka'ab ibn Ujra, who had severe form of lice on his head, so he had to shave the hair. But he had to offer the fidya for doing so. And this is because he did this for his own benefit. So he still had to offer the fidya, even though it was a case of necessity. And so this is the same thing. This man, he kills his game animal, not because the game animal attacks him and he kills him to defend himself, in which case there would be no jaza, but rather here he does it for his own benefit, which is to eat. So therefore, he can do this, he's not sinful, but he has to offer the jaza. The other opinion on this debatable issue would be that he does not offer the jaza because for him to kill this animal to eat is permissible. And whatever results from that which is permissible, then you are not a guarantor for it. Therefore there is no jaza. But we think that the weightier opinion here and the safer one would be to offer the jaza, because at the end of the day you did kill this game animal for your benefit and not just because the animal was attacking you. The animal didn't transgress against you such that there would be no jaza. Rather, you did this for your benefit, just like Ka'ab ibn Ujra with the lice on his head, and also you did do this intentionally. It's not like you did it by mistake such that there would be no jaza upon you. And definitely this would be the safer option to take, that you do kill the game animal to eat from its meat and you offer the jaza. Okay, what about this situation? He's going to die of hunger and he has two choices: a dead sheep, or he can capture a live wolf and give it a halal slaughter. So what does he do? We say the answer here is that he eats the dead sheep and he does not give the wolf the halal slaughter, because at least with the sheep, its asl is that it is halal to eat. It's only haram now because it's dead meat and has not been given a halal slaughter. As for the wolf, this is haram in and of itself, just like a pig, whereas the sheep is not haram in and of itself, rather it is haram due to an external factor here, which is that it is now dead. Or what about this situation? A man has two wives and he absolutely must have conjugal relations, but one wife is fasting and the other one is in her menses. Some scholars say that he has intercourse with the ha'id, the one in menstruation, because if he has intercourse with the sa'ima, the one who is fasting, then in that case it would ruin her act of ibadah, which is the sawm. The other opinion is that he has intercourse with the sa'ima because you're allowed to break your fast because of the necessity of others. For example, the breastfeeding woman is allowed to break her fast due to the child, or the woman who is pregnant is allowed to break her fast because of the child. Or if, for example, you have to save somebody who is drowning, but in order to do so you need to replenish your energy and eat and drink, but you're fasting, then you're allowed to break the fast because of this. And also, the reason why the intercourse is prohibited during the hayd is because of the place of intercourse itself, because of the bleeding. Whereas this is not the case with the fasting. With the fasting, intercourse is prohibited because it would break the fast. It's got nothing to do with the place of the intercourse. However, if we say that the fasting woman is allowed to have intercourse with the husband in a case of the necessity of the husband, what do we mean by necessity? Do we simply mean that the husband has a high sex drive? Or do we mean that if he does not have intercourse, it could lead to health problems? The answer is that we mean the latter. So it needs to be known here that just having a high sex drive is not considered as a necessity, and that the husband has to simply keep patient. Okay, let us take a few review questions. Question number 1. When you have two partners sharing in a property, let's say a wall or a well, then in terms of
paying for the service, what is the difference between refurbishment and decoration? Question number 2. Explain the difference between a khula situation when the evidence you have is one witness and an oath taken by the claimant. So explain the difference between when the man claims a khula and the woman claiming a khula. Question number 3. If a muhrim is about to die out of hunger, which is the better option for him if he only has the following 2 options: eating a dead sheep or hunting a halal game animal? Explain your answer.